Jame, a game jam game made in 4 days for the GMTK GameJam, following the theme loop. In this game, you move a character towards one of the doors. After successfully doing so, the loop repeats, having you play the same level again, but with a twist. You'll have a ghost simulate your previous movement, interacting with the environment, helping you reach the next door. If you want to play this game, you can do so on badpaddy.itch.io/Jame. Anyway, here's how I made it. My personal goal for this challenge was to make a game equally good or better than Scalewind Puzzle, which I made for previous GMTK GameJam. I spent the first few hours looking for an easy to understand idea which could be prototyped in preferably the first day, and eventually expanded if required. First, I thought of something with meta progression, playing the same run a bunch of times, upgrading your character each time. I thought of escape room like time loops and having to break free of them, or maybe something where you'd need to connect wires completing the loop, allowing current to pass through. Eventually, I settled on the idea of a simple co-op game, but instead of multiple players playing simultaneously, you're playing alone one run after another. First things first, I wrote a script to track and simulate players. Whenever the player moves a specific distance, the new position along with simulation time will be stored in a list. Upon restart, those lists will be used to simulate the previous players. To do so, I took the first element pair of the list, calculated the time difference between the step time and the current time, as well as the distance between the step position and the current position, to linearly interpolate between the current point and the next point in the correct amount of time. I added automatic restarts on entering doors and interactables. I made an abstract class for the interactables, which had a public method to start and stop interactions, which will be called by the player whenever it enters or leaves the button. The interactable class then checks if it is already being interacted with, or if it is a toggle, to ensure that the actual interact method is only called when the first player enters, and the interaction only stops when all players leave the button. Unless if it's set to toggle, in which case it switches state on every player entry. This whole abstract class thingy is kind of unnecessary since I only ended up using it for elevators, but initially I also planned to implement lasers and maybe some other kinds of obstacles. In my first prototype I also added squishing to players as well as ghosts to have you make choices very carefully, but I ended up disabling it for ghosts since they would also be able to fly without platforms. Initially, I wanted to actually check whether the ghosts are allowed to be flying, means if they jumped or if they're on platforms, but that would have required to rewrite the whole simulation and tracking system to also remember user input, and that just seemed like too much effort. At the end of day 1, I already had a working prototype, one complete level, and managed to even get started on some of the visuals. I went with pixel art style, mostly following this color palette. I mainly just added a black outline to make sure that I always had enough contrast, even when restricting myself to 5 colors. The reason I went with this style is mainly because I find it easier and quicker to make appealing textures with a consistent style using pixel art. Also, this level made it into the final version with the name Original. In the next 24 hours, I mostly focused on visuals. It was relatively simple. I made the elevators using the same color palette, keeping them the same pixel scale as the walls. I drew background tiles, I added particle systems and 2D lights, and I added this fancy door animation. I've been procrastinating designing the characters until now, but I needed to get it done at some point. I used a different color palette for the ghost and just got started making something. I wasn't happy with it back then, but I feel like sometimes it's just the best to get started with something and improve it later if required. I mean, something is usually better than nothing at all. I also made sprites for the restart buttons. You have 3 restart options. The first one resets the entire level, the next one allows you to replay your previous iteration, and the last one restarts the current iteration. Implementing that was actually quite annoying since I needed to reset all the elevators and stuff like that, which I did with the built-in Unity scene management reloading, but I had to keep the simulator alive and also the door states when restarting only the current iteration. Therefore, I excluded the simulator from being destroyed and reload, which then had to be manually destroyed to reset the entire level. That led to some bugs, to which I'll come later. It felt like I made no progress that day, but visually it did actually look a lot better. On the pre to last day, my goal was to finalize all visuals and maybe finish the sounds. I finally got started working on the player. I wanted some humanoid robot thingy, which was quite challenging since I'm definitely not good at character design. I didn't have a lot of pixels and colors available and just experimented around a bit until I came up with this design. I'm quite satisfied with it actually. Initially, I thought also of using another color palette for the player to guarantee enough contrast, but I'm really glad I stuck with the palette I already used. Otherwise, it would probably have been too colorful, and the black outline luckily provides enough contrast already. Also, I think this character sort of looks like a walking light bulb, which I think kind of fits the whole environment. For the ghost, I just duplicated the sprite sheet, adapted the color palette and reduced the opacity in Unity. I have to say, I do really like how they ended up looking. And the player can actually be squished by a platform, and I just love how the shattering animation looks like. Like, whenever I got squished while trying to complete a level, I was just pleased about seeing the animation again. Then I spent way more time than I should have on the loading screen, because it just didn't look the way I wanted it. It still doesn't, but it's good enough. Due to my weird restarting methods, adding the load screen felt like trying to get a drawer filled with the insides of a cushion to close. Don't ask me why I have a drawer filled with cushion filling. Anyway, I wasted the rest of the day trying to implement a custom font in Unity. I didn't manage to make the font, converting a sprite sheet to the TTF. It works in Word, it works in Paint.net, however, I didn't manage to get it work in Unity. So when it came to writing the level names in the level select screen, I wrote a helper script to instantiate a bunch of images and set their sprites to the corresponding character. I didn't manage to get the sounds done that day though. In the last 24 hours, I still had the main menu, sounds and the levels to make. I wasn't sure about how to name the game, so I asked for some advice, leading to the creation of Jame. I made some title text using the same color palette, trying to match the vibe of the game, and added some of the characters to it. I think especially with the characters standing on the text, it looks quite interesting. I then completed the menu and improved the level select screen. It's very similar to the one in Scalewind Puzzle. This all took me already 3 hours. I then decided to start working on the sounds. I really wanted to make my own sound effects, because that would mean all assets, including sounds, fonts, generally everything, was made by myself during the jam. I knew I probably wouldn't have enough time to make my own sound effects, so I just recorded some placeholder sounds. And they kind of ended up staying in the final version. La 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 la. Click. La 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 la. La 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 click 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 footstep footstep click click foot jump footstep elevator is moving elevator is footstep 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 activate complete snaps into place footstep 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 activator is moving. You've been squished. The activator is moving. I spent the rest of the day quickly putting together some levels. I usually don't like making levels, but I knew I had to make them. I knew time was running out, so I just did what I could. And actually, I really enjoyed making levels this time. While I was making levels, a friend was playtesting them and found some more bugs. They were related to my restarting behavior, and I tried to fix them, which initially just led to this bigger but also funnier bug. I did eventually manage to fix it. No beautiful fix, more like a duct tape fix just to hold it together, but it did work. With that, almost done and submitted. Thanks for watching. If you want, you can tell me your thoughts about this in the comments and go play it yourself on badpaddy.itch.io/jame. Also, if you ever get stuck playing, I uploaded an unlisted gameplay video of which you can find the link here in the description or over on the itch.io game page. Thanks for watching, see you next time, bye!